By 2023, the Scottish wildcat was gone. So officials did something that seemed completely insane. They released 19 semi-wild cats into the mountains. Hunters warned they would be shot dead at night. Geneticists said they would dissolve into hybrids within a generation. 19 became 30. 30 became hundreds. And what scientists saw next changed everything we thought we knew about bringing extinct species back. 9,000 years ago, a wildcat crossed into Britain over a land bridge, the same one that now lies beneath the North Sea. It settled into the niche of an unobtrusive nocturnal hunter, and it stayed there for a long time. At the start of the 19th century, the population still existed across Scotland, England, and Wales. It was an ordinary animal, not rare, just cautious. Then came the shooting estates, the gamekeepers, and the vermin column in annual reports. By 1880, the cat had vanished from England and Wales and continued retreating northward for decades more, until only one corner of the Highlands remained. From 1984 to 1985 alone, 274 individuals were killed across 40 estates, and that was only what got written down. Meanwhile, the forests shrank, and feral domestic cats interbred with the wildcat, diluting the genome generation by generation. But the most dangerous threat did not come from a rifle. Domestic cats had lived alongside the wildcat for millennia and rarely interbred with it. Two distinct species, two distinct habitats, two distinct niches. Then, in the 1950s, the wildcat population fell so low that mates of its own kind simply were not available, and the cat began breeding with whoever was nearby. The process accelerated quickly. Geneticists at RZSS determined that in some modern wildcats, the domestic cat genome accounts for as much as 74%. Scientists called it genetic swamping. The species was not disappearing, it was dissolving. The wildcat is nearly indistinguishable from a feral domestic cat. A gamekeeper shooting nocturnal cats to protect grouse or pheasant cannot tell the protected species from legitimate quarry in the dark. What is more, if you release several dozen pure cats into a forest alongside thousands of feral hybrids, hybridization speeds up rather than slows down. This was a precise risk assessment, not hysteria. It was the logic of people who saw every day what the forest looked like from the inside. At the Clashindarroch estate in Aberdeenshire, at least 35 wildcats were found, a significant proportion of the entire known population. At the same time, the Swedish energy company Vattenfall filed an application to clear the old-growth forest on that same site for wind turbines. 800,000 signatures were collected against the felling. Conservationists and gamekeepers suddenly found themselves on the same side, and both groups had reason to doubt the new plan. It seemed that protecting what remained should come before any reintroduction. In 2019, the IUCN Cat Specialist Group published an independent assessment. The Scottish wildcat was functionally extinct in the wild. The population was too small and too hybridized. Without intervention, it would face final disappearance, and that would mean more than the loss of a single species. The wildcat is the only small mammal predator that evolved alongside British forests for 9,000 years. Not introduced or adapted from elsewhere, it was native. It was the wildcat that kept vole and hare populations in check along forest edges, the zones where young growth is most vulnerable, where a young pine or birch either survives its first 2 seasons or disappears forever. Without that pressure, rodents filled the niche completely and held it for decades without any counterweight. For Scotland, this is also a question of cultural identity. The wildcat has appeared on clan heraldry since the 13th century, its silhouette on seals and banners. The motto of Clan Chattan is touch, not the cat, but a glove. To lose it entirely would mean something different from losing an insect or a plant. It would be the erasure from the landscape of something that had always been part of it. In June 2023, the Royal Zoological Society of Scotland released 19 cats into the Cairngorms National Park, the first conservation reintroduction of a felid in British history. Every animal was fitted with a GPS collar. Dr. Martin Gaywood, Species Projects Manager at NatureScot and co-author of the study, reviewed movement logs daily. 10 months after release, 18 of the 19 cats were alive. They had gained an average of 20% body weight. There were no signs of disease at checkups. But the real surprise came in May 2024. The team reviewed camera trap footage and they saw wildcat kittens born in the wild for the first time in many years. Not one female, 7. Of the 9 females that had reached reproductive age after release, 7 had produced litters. Gaywood looked at the number several times, then said, "This completely exceeded our expectations." By August 2025, 5 more births had been confirmed in the Cairngorms. In total, 46 cats had been released. Only 4 deaths were known. For predator reintroduction programs worldwide, that is below average mortality. But the fields along the forest edges where the released cats had begun to settle drew the attention of volunteers in the very first seasons. Field vole trackways had become shorter and less predictable, at least according to camera trap data from adjacent plots. Whether this was connected to the presence of cats or to other changes in land management remains unclear. A field volunteer documenting understory regeneration for Cairngorms. Connect on plots adjacent to areas where cats had been confirmed showed researchers 2 photographs. The first was a forest edge in 2022. Grass, bare soil, no regeneration above ankle height. The second showed the same angle in 2024, 8 rowan stems, the tallest reaching to the knee. The cause of the change has not been established. It could be the cat's effect on rodent behavior, a shift in the deer population, or simply a good seed year. Researchers noted the observation and are not yet drawing conclusions from it. Tropical ecology has long documented a similar effect. When a mesopredator returns to a system, it does not merely reduce prey numbers, it changes prey behavior. The field vole eats its own body weight in plant material every day, including bark, roots, and young shoots. But where a predator is present, it changes its routes, avoids open ground, reduces time on the surface, and stays closer to its burrows. Studies in commercial orchards have shown that even without any reduction in vole numbers, the behavioral shift under predator pressure is sufficient for young trees to survive where they previously could not. Not because there are fewer voles, but because the voles have become more cautious. For a rowan or birch seedling, the difference between a vole being here and a vole being afraid to be here can mean the difference between a dead tree and a living one in the first winter. What do ecologists expect now? They frame their questions carefully, not out of fear of being wrong, but because the system is more complex than any single hypothesis. The wildcat is a mesopredator, a middle link in the trophic chain. It does not regulate deer populations the way wolves or lynx would, but it occupies a niche that has been empty for over 100 years, nocturnal control of small mammals along forest edges. The cat is returning to a system that no longer expects it. Researchers from the Wildlife Conservation Research Unit at Oxford University, who monitored hybrid populations in Scotland from 2010 to 2015, found that wildcats occupy forest edge habitats, zones where open pasture meets the forest floor. These are precisely the bottlenecks for tree regeneration, where young pines, birches, and rowans are most often destroyed by rodents before they reach a height beyond a vole's reach. If the cat consistently maintains even moderate pressure on rodents in these zones, not eliminating them, but making them behave more cautiously, the effect on regeneration could be disproportionately large relative to the number of cats themselves. But there are limits. Scots pine regenerates slowly even without rodent pressure. From seed to a tree 2 meters tall takes at least 10 to 15 years. Some areas of the Cairngorms show almost no natural pine regeneration even after deer numbers have fallen, they simply lack seed stock. Cairngorms Connect is running experimental planting at Abernethy, but that is restoration over generations, not years. The wildcat can change the conditions for young growth, but it cannot compensate for the absence of seed. The wildcat also eats hares. In eastern Scotland, rabbits and hares can make up as much as 70% of the diet where their density is high. The brown hare strips bark from young trees in winter. In the Cairngorms, birch and rowan bark on young growth remains vulnerable until a tree reaches roughly 1 meter in height. The indirect effect of the cat through hare population control may turn out to be more significant for forest recovery than its direct effect through voles. There is a third scenario, spoken of with particular caution. The capercaillie, Britain's largest grouse, is critically endangered. As of 2022, only 542 birds remained in Scotland, and 85% of them live in the Cairngorms. One of the main drivers of decline is nest predation by fox, crow, and pine marten. and studies in the Cairngorms identify their combined pressure as the decisive factor for clutch survival. The wildcat theoretically occupies a similar ecological niche to the fox. Both are nocturnal forest-edge mesopredators. Whether their coexistence might redistribute predation pressure at critical nesting sites is unknown. No study of wildcat and fox interaction in a Scottish context has yet been published. Camera traps at nesting sites have already been positioned. In December 2025, Devon Wildlife Trust published a 2-year study on the feasibility of wildcat reintroduction in southern England. The conclusion: the forest cover of Devon and Cornwall is sufficient for a viable population. 71% of residents supported the idea. Free-range poultry farms are a risk zone, but the same protective measures used against foxes are sufficient against cats. Wales and Northern England are conducting their own assessments in parallel. The University of Exeter found that 83% of 1,425 respondents supported reintroduction, a level of support significantly higher than organizers had expected. Nordens Ark in Sweden and the Junta de Andalucía in Spain have joined saving wildcats to exchange genetic material between isolated populations across Europe. More targeted releases are planned for 2026. Males will be released into areas with concentrations of females to reduce hybridization pressure.